The Isle of Man General Election 2021 coverage on Manx Radio.
Good evening and welcome live to the Pulrose Community Pub. Douglas South constituency debate. Douglas South's boundaries include the districts of Annika, Belafton and Pulrose. The MHKs before the House of Keys was dissolved on the 12th of August were Claire Christian and Paul Quine. There are 4 candidates for this constituency for 2 weeks tomorrow. Claire Christian, Gerard Higgins, Sarah Maltby and Paul Quine. Tonight we'll hear from them. We'll also hear from the audience at the Pulrose Community Pub. I'll have to tell you, I'm sitting just in front of the pool table by the oven. I've never done that before. First of all, why do you want to be MHK for Douglas South? Claire Christian.
Thank you, Andy. My name is Claire Christian. I was born and I was also educated on the Isle of Man, and I currently live in Saddlestone in the Douglas South constituency. I basically got into being a politician before I got elected, about 6 months or 7 months before, and that was due to the pandemic. And I started helping with the local businesses and self-employed people and helping them to understand the business support and widening that support to them. Growing our existing economy is one of my 3 top national priorities, because 70% of our local economy is based on small businesses and self-employed people. I want to be the MHK because I have it's my calling. It's been something that I've really put my heart and soul into. Absolutely helping the people of Douglas South and nationally, and really making a difference. And I've been reminded of that when I've gone around the constituency, meeting people and seeing their point of view and them giving me wonderful feedback, and seeing the effect, whether it be a motion, whether it be a vote, or whether it be a speech that I've made or something actually that's in policy. It's really helped a lot of people. Okay,
Gerard Higgins.
Thank you, Andy. Good evening, everyone. I want to be a breath of fresh air to Manx politics. I think government is working in silos. It's lost touch with its employers, namely you, the people. It's time to end overspending on gold-plated projects, endless layers of management and bureaucracy, and the ever-increasing wage bill. I'm standing for joined-up government, efficient government that's open, transparent and accountable, and government that goes back to the basics of working for you, the people, our community and local businesses.
Sarah Maltby.
Hello. In January 1985, I was born into a life where public service and duty and responsibility was taken very seriously. Although I didn't realise it at the time, my community first views were being formed by the customers in our family-run business and the Douglas South constituents that surrounded me. I was not always sheltered from experiences that highlighted the dire social inequalities we still sadly see today, and I spent a considerable amount of time listening and seeing how responding to concerns and always being available is just what you did. I've spent 20 years of my life caring for young children and adults with additional and complex needs. In that time, my resilience, compassion and ability to form trusted relationships has meant I can relate on a human level to people who rarely ask for help or live in a fear of a system that doesn't always appear to fit their needs. This must change.
Paul Quine.
Thank you, Andy. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not one to sit on the sidelines. As a local lad who grew up in the area, I chose to stand in the by-election last year because there were certain local issues which, due to the lack of representation, had been allowed to gather momentum. In addition, there were certain national issues which had been allowed to drift. I'm a proud and passionate Manxman who likes to get things done for the best of Douglas South and our island. Having served the constituency, I believe I have gained valuable experience. That is something which, if re-elected, I'm sure will stand me in good stead for the times which lie ahead of us.
I want to start with a local issue, and we'll start reverse alphabetical order. Paul Quine, what is going on at Snaefell Surgery and how can it be solved?
It's a very good question, Andy, and it's something which matters to so many people, not just here in Douglas South, but in the adjacent constituency of Middle and in the sort of wider part of the town. To get to the crux of the issue is the funding of the surgery, or more particular, the mechanism, the formula of the funding. So that needs to be addressed. So we need to sit down, whoever's re-elected, needs to sit down with the Department of Health and Social Care, and we need to look at the actual formula, because the formula is not working with regard to Snaefell Surgery.
Sarah Maltby.
We need to reassure our constituents, if elected, that their views matter and that they are listened to. At the moment, I feel like the communication to residents hasn't been what it should have been. There might be funding issues, but really, if you've got a bad knee, if you don't feel very well, you need to know that your surgery's there and it's ready for you.
Yeah,
and at the moment,
the patients don't care who funds who.
no,
They just
exactly.
want their knee.
They want the job
Yeah.
sorted.
Yeah.
And obviously, I want to be able to get into the House of Keys to be able to put these issues right.
Has this been coming up on the doorstep?
To be honest, it hasn't as much as I thought it would be, because to me it's a massive issue. It's one that's dragged on really for the last year. I mean, there was something came out not long ago, but there was previous discussions about this, and we thought we'd had that issue sorted, but obviously not.
Gerard Higgins.
I think there's a wider issue here as well. Obviously, we have to look after our own community first, but first and foremost, I think the wider issue here is getting more GP numbers on the ground, not just from the UK. We need to look wider and make sure that we have the number of GPs there to be able to give the support to our community, because what people want more than anything is the ability to go along and see their GP rather than just phone calls all the time. They want that ability to be able to go in and talk to someone, and this must be a major priority of whoever is elected in this constituency.
Claire Christian.
There is a national GP shortage in the UK, and if we want to attract GPs to the Isle of Man, we need to aggressively do this now. We need to get the Department of Enterprise to absolutely work with Visit Isle of Man and get the GPs to know that we're here, because it is a funding issue, but we absolutely need to attract this higher level skilled people to the Isle of Man, and that is absolutely crucial for Douglas South.
We must look to incentivise it. You know, even if there's tax measures or something, we've got to look at some incentives to actually get GPs here and staying here, because what else we're doing is we're just paying agency fees. We want to actually put the money...
Well, there are locums at Snaefell at the moment, aren't
yes,
they?
but
Which are expensive.
If you actually look at agency fees paid out across government in the last year, it was a budget of 1.7 million. We paid about 9.8 million. Now, that is not just necessarily healthcare, but again, it's just paying out agency fees rather than what we want to do is be paying salaries to get those people actually here on the island, and more importantly, retaining them.
And some of those locums actually are former partners of the surgery. I mean, they're passionate. They believe in the people of Douglas South. They want to give the best provision and deliver the best healthcare and well-being across the area.
But in a microcosm, this is the difference between the breakdown between the voters and the government.
What's gone wrong is bureaucracy. It's a bureaucratic victory here,
yes,
because the funding model is effectively broken, and unless we fix the funding model, we won't address the issues at the surgery.
But they said it was fixed.
Well, unfortunately, it wasn't, because the dynamic of the patients at Snaefell surgery does not suit the funding model. So what we need to do is take a fresh look at the funding model in order to be able to fund the surgery properly, to deliver the healthcare that our people rightly deserve.
Sarah Maltby, let's talk about young voters. Are you confident that young voters, 16-year-olds and upwards, are going to be turning out 2 weeks tomorrow?
Well, I'd like to think so. I've been banging the drum about it for a long time. This isn't just a one issue now we talk about in the run-up to a general election. This has been something that I've been talking about for a long time. I work in Ballycomine High School at the moment, so I've got those people at my disposal that I've been trying to talk to and invigorate. I mean, even the people that I've been talking about when I go around the constituency, the amount of kids that you get following you on their scooters, it's brilliant. You know, they're asking questions. So I don't understand how, when they get from this to the actual registering, but what happens, what stops them from registering in the first place? Is it parents? Do they not feel confident in the system, and they're concerned that they don't want their the children to get involved in it, you know, and distance themselves from politics? And I think they shouldn't. There's nothing to be scared of. We need to open the door.
Gerard Higgins, what will be your message now if somebody is age 16 registered to vote in Douglas South? What will be your, apart from vote Higgins, of course?
What I would say is we need to really address this whole issue of young people and getting them to engage. One of my proposals is that we need to have focus groups where we're sitting down, we're talking with these people, we're seeing what their needs are. They are our future generation. We need to be investing in them. We need to be looking at what activities we've got for them in the community, not just in our community alone, but across the island as well. So we need to be really engaging with them.
Claire Christian, do you think politics and young people are connected?
I absolutely think they should be. I don't think they perhaps are enough right now. I think that's absolutely true, Andy. I know that when I've gone round on the doorstep and I have interacted with young people, a lot of it has been questions about, well, who are you, what's an MHK, even to that level. And it's just really just speaking to them just on a normal basis, just saying, look, how politics affects you, whether that's in your education, whether that's with your jobs. It's really just talking to them like normal people and just absolutely treating them like adults as they deserve.
It's a shame that you only tend to hear from people if there's a problem. It'd be so much better if we can get more young people involved in helping to set policy and talk about that and be more proactive rather than just coming to us if there's a problem.
And I think that's why we need things like focus groups.
Okay, Paul Quine.
Thank you, Andy. One of the big issues about it is, and young people who I've spoke to, the quite upsetting thing is that they don't wish to vote because they feel that there's nothing worth voting for. And that's the issues that we have to address with people. We have to engage with young people. We have to show them that their future is rightly their vote, and their vote counts for something. So I think we have to ensure that we provide something for them tangibly to see worth voting for.
Okay, and obviously every one of us was young once. I mean, when did you first become politically active? When did you first notice that politics mattered?
Well, at school, I mean, I've always had a keen interest in history, and we used to have some very good debates, actually. I remember at Ballacomene with the late Jeff Hawkins. He was someone who looked to question why certain aspects of history happened politically, and it was very engaging. It really generated a lot of interest in the class. So I feel that's a really good way that teachers can actually engender into young people the desire to engage politically.
Okay, and Sarah Maltby, obviously you're at Ballacomene High School as well. I mean, when I've talked to the pupils of Ballacomene High School, they say we do politics, but we talk about America. We don't do Manx politics. We don't. The Manx politics isn't on the curriculum.
Yeah, it's really frustrating, especially when you talk about Tynwald Day, or did you go and visit Tynwald Day? What did you think of it? What? Why?
We have the oldest continuous parliament.
Absolutely. I'm incredibly proud to be from the Isle of Man, but it really does frustrate me sometimes that you kind of, I don't understand why other people don't think the same as me. I was obviously born into Manx politics, but at the same time, I actively been involved in this myself very actively for the last 15 years at least.
Okay, Gerard Higgins, what's been coming up on the doorstep as you've been knocking doors?
Well, if we look at local issues, one of the main things that people are talking about is things such as our roads, our pavements. They're very much back to basics, that people are seeing that money's being spent on these large projects, continual overspending of projects, and what they're wanting is to basically have decent roads, decent pavements. That is something that's absolutely key to people, and we need to be remembering as politicians that we need to look after our local community as well. I think there's many politicians that what happens is once they get elected, they distance themselves almost, and it's getting into dealing with these projects at national level rather than dealing with things at local level. And I suppose it shouldn't be surprising, but the number of times that things such as roads and pavements and our basic infrastructures come up, and I do really think we need to get back to basics.
Claire Christian.
So on that roads and pavements, I basically started when I first got in. I did a strategy where I went round and logged as many as I could in the constituency because that mattered to me.
You logged what?
Logged with the DOI as many as I could, because as I say, that there's exactly those local issues that mattered to me then and they matter to me now. One of the things that I also hear is obviously about the housing. There's a lot of parents and young people concerned about getting on the housing ladder, and this has been a really, really big issue for many, many people of Douglas South. And this obviously is a national wider issue, and there are solutions to this, and we need to now build more social housing because there is a lack of social housing. It means there's more private rentals, which is driving up the private rental, and then obviously it's driving up the house prices for buy-to-let. We haven't invested in social housing for such a long time, especially in Douglas South, and this has got to be something that this next administration needs to address.
Paul Quine.
Yeah, I mean, touching on the roads and pavements and what Gerard's just said about politicians seeing the national view as opposed to the local view. So when I was elected last year at the by-election, one of the first things I did along with Claire was to ensure that we tried our best to bring pavements and roadways up to some sort of acceptable level, and this involved such things as improving access in and out of Lennox Park for people of impaired mobility, because I was staggered walking round the state of the pavements, and it's only when you actually see someone who has mobility issues that you actually appreciate the sheer difficulty that they have in just their day-to-day life, having reasonable access to anywhere.
Sarah Maltby, what have you picked up on the doorsteps?
Well, there's two things. First thing, walking around Spring Valley, people are absolutely they are so fed up of false promises, of plans that have been cast and then changed again. I'd like to sort of listen to the people, obviously, and create some sort of residents association. I want to see if we can maybe do that if elected. I think that at the time we need to be able to talk to those people and actually hear their views and get communication approved. The second thing, when it comes to roads and pavements, I have a 6-year-old son. If there's anything that's going to go wrong, my son's going to find it. If there's a crack in the pavement, he's going to trip over it. So I don't just see these as an outsider. I walk the streets of South Douglas, and I have done for a long time, 36 years, and even more so now with my children.
Okay, and Claire Christian, I want to talk about police and law and order and antisocial behaviour. What do you think is, it's been reported, we talk about it on the Man in Line all the time, Pulrose, Annika isn't a stranger to anything like that. How do you view that situation?
So I view it very much so that we do obviously have to put plasters on the problem. Obviously the police help with that, but that's not really fundamentally solving the real issue. And the real issue is that our young people don't have enough to do on the Isle of Man. And we really need to concentrate on building some kind of really great community and society, something for them to do. We need to liaise and talk to them about what they would actually want. This is really quite a holistic approach. It's more fundamentally really building a society, a young society, and giving something back to them. And I think that's really what we should be doing as a government. Thank you.
Paul Quine?
Yeah, I mean, Claire's just touched that on something for younger people to do. I mean, when I grew up, as many people in here will probably remember, this was actually the Pulrose Youth Club, which was a focal point in the community for young people to gather and to socialise. So we need to try and reconnect that, because if we don't have such places, then children find their own entertainment, and sometimes it can be of an antisocial variety. So since I was elected at the by-election last year, I've been working with the police very closely, with Sergeant Graham Corran, PC Graham Best, who were appointed to be the neighbourhood police officers, the community officers for this area, and engaged with the councillors through what's called the Hills Initiative. And there are serious issues in the area. I mean, I've sat with people who are part of our older generation who are actually afraid to go out. I've sat with a lady who's in tears because of the antics of their neighbours. So we have to address these issues, and we have to ensure that people who do behave in such a way actually feel the force of the law, and that they are the ones who are persecuted and not the honest, decent people.
But 100 yards away from here, there used to be a police station. I mean, and people will look around and say, who made that sort of decision? There used to be neighbourhood police stations everywhere, and we had bobbies on the beat. Sarah Maltby.
I've got to disagree. I think there is a lot of things for children to do on the Isle of Man. However, it costs money, and people haven't got that money to spend at the moment. If you've got to decide on how you prioritise your money, then spending 50 quid on a day out with lunch and tickets to different things, it's going to cost. It's too expensive. We need to give people the opportunity to upskill, to be able to get employment first of all, and also to be able to give them the opportunity then to spend their money on these facilities that we do have on the Isle of Man.
Go, Sarah? Where
Teenagers.
do teenagers go? Where are these places that that you're talking about? Very young children. There are quite a lot. I do agree with you.
Yeah, where are the
teenagers? There's only pubs and places like that, and they can't actually come into
We've got a football club across the road.
You have to be sporty.
So we have a football club with the shelter that's fallen to bits. We need to be invested in these in those places. We need to be invested in that, not asking parents to constantly try and entertain their children. As a government, we need to be able to find a way to be able to support community-based projects in order to be able to provide the facilities that you're talking about for teenagers.
Do you think there are enough police on the streets of the Isle of Man, in particular in Douglas South?
Well, we know that the police...
Plainly, if the older generation are living in fear in their houses, it's the Isle of Man in 2021.
Well,
How can that be?
Andy, can I just answer?
Just let Sarah Maltby, if
No,
you have something to say.
of course we need more police officers, but we also not just police officers, but for like first responders, but people that might not necessarily like you. Like we do have, but like investing more into that area, because I think if people just see a presence and they see somebody walking around, like you have your wardens,
Okay.
I think people would feel certainly more secure.
Okay, Claire Christian, then Paul Quine.
Thank you, Andy. So what I was going to say is basically I've obviously gone in the night time with the police, done one of those runs, and I was quite shocked that how there was only, say, 3 or 4 of the vans that were, one was in down south, one was, they could be split. I was really shocked at how actually we are short of police, and that's something that we really need to look at and invest in, especially as crime is going up.
Okay, Paul Quine.
Yeah, we need to utilise the police better. I mean, they're spending 20% of their time sitting in the station doing paperwork. Now that has to be, we have to cut down on the bureaucracy and get the police where they're needed, out meeting the people and assuring the general public.
Get people
Can I have
to do the
Gerard,
on this particular point? I was speaking to the Chief Constable only the other week. Now, he's got 219 officers, or 219 staff in his force. That may seem a lot, but when you think of shift work, when you think of cybercrime, when you think of drugs,
mental health,
financial crime, that doesn't add up to be an awful lot. So what I would also say, yes, we need more police, but equally, what we need to do is have more joined-up government, because one of the things that Chief Constable was saying to me is when there are issues, there's difficulties in talking to social services, in talking to education. We need to be investing in early years.
Well, you've been in Treasury for how long?
I've worked in Treasury for 39 years, but I've worked on the tax side of things, Andy.
Right, okay. So you know all about empire building in the civil service. You know how, as you mentioned, silos inside government.
Yeah, and that's why I'm standing.
But again, how can you break that down?
Because you've got to have a strong enough voice to break it down. And I would hope that whoever gets in this constituency will fight for that.
Force of will.
Yes, it really has to be, and it has to be shouting loud enough, because you're doing it for the people out there and for not just the South Douglas community, but for the whole of the Isle of Man. OK,
Paul Quine, everything has to be paid for, and the businesses of the Isle of Man and the economy of the Isle of Man has to go up. How are we going to do it?
You're right, Andy. I mean, this is the fundamental thing. We have to have a good, strong, robust economy, because if we don't have an economy, we don't have anything. We can talk about police, we can talk about education, healthcare, pensions, everything else. It's all underpinned by the economy. And you cannot give something to someone until you have first taken it from somebody else. So we have to ensure that our economy is robust and flexible. We need to go out, we need to reach out into the world to ensure that we attract business in. Our biosphere needs to be promoted for all it's worth. We need to look at biotech companies looking to redeploy here. We need to embrace green energy, because I understand that the UK generates something like over £200 million a year from a stakeholder who has a wind farm on a sea area approximately about 20% that of Manx territorial waters. So we need to engage in the new generation of stakeholders in order to build a new economy and to drive these services forward.
Sarah Maltby.
Morally, pulling people out of poverty is not only the right thing to do, but it's a way of making revenue, for increasing revenue. I agree with what Paul has said on the international and the national scale. However, if you don't look after the domestic issues, then you just plough money into patching up services that are never going to be fully funded or looked after properly.
But who's going to create the jobs?
Well, first of all, you need to get people upskilled. You need to get more vocational courses in schools. You need to introduce these areas more early on. Let people see that the Isle of Man is a good place to be. If they see that's a good place to be, they want to stay here. They buy a house here, hopefully, and they raise a family here. And then that's all put money into the system. At the moment, they're just leaving. So you might have the biggest and the most fanciest place for the Isle of Man to be, but if you can't get people to come and stay here, then it's not worth anything.
Do you think the education, apart from the students who go to university, the Chamber of Commerce issued a report that said that 50% of the students coming out of school that didn't go to university, they found them difficult to find jobs because they weren't properly educated.
We need to change how we measure success. At the moment, success is based on how many GCSEs you've got, and we need to change that. Yeah. That's a big piece of work, obviously. Yes. But the ethos, it needs to be more holistic, more person-centred, and it needs to be able to say that the Isle of Man is a good place. We look after our people here. We don't just say, well, you haven't got 10 GCSEs and you haven't got your A-levels and you haven't been to university, we're not interested. interested. We need to look after the people, put the people first.
Okay, Gerard Higgins.
We have to invest in apprenticeships and internships as well. We need to have more courses available on the Isle of Man. We have to really invest in our young people, but equally we also have to grow and we have to diversify our economy, because we are becoming increasingly dependent on various sectors within the economy. But also, if we're wanting to pay for things, we need to cut the waste as well. We need to reduce the size of government departments. We need to stop the gold-plated projects and the project overspend. That's equally as important to me as well as growing our economy.
Claire Christian, sorry.
Thank you. We've got, it's very similar, obviously, joined up government. That's one way that we can streamline and make more efficiencies. We want value for money in our government. We have to prioritise our actual spending, and we have to communicate that and be really far more open and transparent about it. On the other side, in terms of the economy and people, as I said before, we talk about diversity, but we actually do have quite a diverse economy here on the island, but it's made up of very small businesses, and that's because we don't have the bigger companies here. So we do have to support those local business and show them and bring them along with how they can grow from a 2-man business to a 10-man business, so that other people from university can come in and they can be film producers, fashion designers, art designers, whatever that is. That's how we build up the diverse economy, because you're not going to have 20 or 40 or 50 different industries on the Isle of Man. It is just not going to happen. But we can we can pick very specific industries like biomed, fintech, and we can build jobs that way, where there's sort of 300 or 400 jobs. But again, that's all relative to the education.
Okay, we've just got 5 minutes or 4 minutes left before we go to questions from the audience. So I want to talk about just a very small subject, the climate challenge. Just for about a minute, Sarah Maltby.
The climate challenge in a minute, wow. There's quite a few businesses on the Isle of Man already that currently don't receive the support or the encouragement that they could do with to be able to grow their business. If we can support those places, I'd obviously really support that as well. But the climate crisis.
I mean, the government
it's huge.
In the UK,
in a minute.
Just in one sentence. Then the UK is introducing E10 petrol next month. 10% ethanol. The Isle of Man government has chosen not to do it, while stating that we're going to be carbon neutral by 2030. And that's one thing they could have introduced straight away. Solar panels, there are no solar panels, very few solar panels on government buildings. Do you think the government's connected with do you think they take the climate challenge seriously?
I think that all buildings going forward on houses as well should be properly insulated. Those things should be done before we even consider or give anybody any planning permission. That should definitely be part of legislation.
Okay, Gerard Higgins.
I think we need actual regulations to ensure that when work is being done on existing properties or new properties, whether it's social housing or new builds, that we need to be making sure that they are environmentally friendly. And I think we also need to be ensuring, and this ties in with the housing crisis as well, more urban regeneration. We've got sites like Park Road School, we've got sites like the Isle of Man Prison. The government own those. They could be using them and building on them.
Okay, Claire Christian.
So let's make this clear. The people of Douglas South, they want to know how climate change, what they can do for climate change and how it affects them. So we need an administration that's going to be very clear and give you an estimate of when you need to do things, whether that might be heat source pumps, whether that might be solar powers, what you can do. And it's a very good point about the E10 as well. I think this administration's missing a trick on not bringing that in. I've looked into it, and I think it's something that we could absolutely effectively do now. The Isle of Man can make a change with climate change. Some people think that it's not, and it will be costly, but that's where we've got to get external investment, back to what Paul was talking about, so that we don't cost that bill. But Douglas South, you need to plan a clear plan of what you need to do going ahead.
Okay, jolly good. Bless you, sir, by the way. And Paul Quine.
Yeah, just touching on what Claire said, ladies and gentlemen, we have to ensure that the future is properly mapped out and costed correctly, because, ladies and gentlemen, it is you who will ultimately end up paying for this. So we have to ensure we have a proper map from where we begin to, and where we're wanting to get to, and how we go about it. And it has to be properly laid out. As I say, we can't just set sail with blind idealism on this issue. So we have to look at it in a wider context. We have to look at government buildings. We have to change the building regulations so as solar panels are incorporated into certain new builds. I mean, there's a new vehicle test centre, I think, being built. Where's the ground source heat pumps? Where's the solar energy? I stood up in the House of Keys, and that's why the Manx Utilities Authority was reducing the tariff payments per kilowatt hour from 9.2 to 8.2 pence, effectively an 11% cut for the domestic generation of electricity. In my opinion, just sends out all the wrong messages.
Okay, now it's time. We're live, by the way, at the Pinewood Community Pub in Pulrose today with the candidates of Douglas South, Claire Christian, Gerard Higgins, Sarah Maltby and Paul Quine. By the way, there is what they used to call an old-fashioned requisition meeting. Now they call the pre-election meetings, and it's Thursday the 16th of September, that being a week tomorrow from 7 till 9 at Annika Primary School, and you're more than welcome to just pitch up there. We've got an audience tonight at Pulrose, so who's got a question for the candidates? Your name, sir?
Good evening, Frank Schungel.
And what's the question?
I'm one of the councillors for Douglas South. So the question is one I asked other candidates before, and it's probably one of the most important ones. The last administration was supposed to reduce the size of government. It was a big thing everyone talked about. The size actually went up. What will you do to reduce the size of government to make things more efficient? So in 5 years' time, we don't sit here with another 1,000 more people.
Paul Quine.
Well, we can look at certain outsourcing. My background's commercial aviation. I think when I started work at Manx Airlines many moons ago, practically all the employees at Ronaldsway Airport were government employees. A lot of that has been outsourced, but we can look at other outsourcing of that, such as the fire brigade, for instance. In addition, it's all fair and good saying about cutting the amount of people in government, but we also have to look at increasing the amount of people in government, because we want more teachers, we want more policemen, we want more GPs, we want our hospital better staffed. So we have to actually qualify how we go about it. We need to cut out the waste. There's no two ways about that. But that shouldn't put us off from actually recruiting the brightest and best into the government to ensure our future.
Okay, well, this is your mantra, Gerard Higgins.
We need to see an emphasis more on frontline services, like Paul said. We need those GPs, we need those teachers, but we also need to reduce the workforce. We need a transfer away from the bureaucracy and layers of management into providing frontline services for you, but we equally need to save money. If you actually look at the public sector turnover over a year, you will find through natural wastage and retirements, etc., that you lose about 5% of your staff. If you saved 1% of that in year one, 2% in year two, 1% equals £4 million, because if you actually look at the government accounts, the wage bill for government is actually £414 million. Irrespective of what's said in the newspapers, if you actually tot everything up in the government accounts, it's £414 million. So saving 1% a year, 4 million in the first year, 8 million in the second year, you can save up to £60 million in the first administration, £100 million in the second administration. But equally, we have to convert a lot of those management jobs into the frontline services for schools and hospitals.
Claire Christian.
So come back to joined up government, because actually what a joined up government means, and we've just seen this during the COVID pandemic, we've proved that government can actually work together. You can move employees to other departments when there's pressure zones there, and that's exactly what we need to do. We need to make it far more flexible, and this is actually great for the employees because they can learn new skills, they can upskill, they can move, and they can move into higher senior roles, and actually that's far more beneficial. So it is about cutting off the fat, as what my colleague said, Paul Quine. It's about cutting off that, but actually looking at the government as a whole and working it in that way.
Sarah Maltby.
Kind of what Kai just said there, we need to be actually asking people what their skills are, how can we use people more smartly. At the moment, it's not. That doesn't happen, so you just think, well, we need more people to be able to do this. But coming from a background from working in government for a long time, and obviously working in a place where we don't get new staff, or when we do get staff, it's kind of like, well, you could have 2 ESOs for the price of that member of staff, and that really is what it is. But we all work hard in government, people do. But I think, like I said, it's just about working smarter and making sure that when decisions are made, everyone's involved in that decision making, and you understand if people feel like they're getting value for money, they don't necessarily have a complaint with that. What they have a complaint with is people perceived to be taking in a lot of money and not doing a lot for
and that's
it.
the perception. Well, for many people, perception's reality.
And that's what we need to find out. What is the reality? Data on the Isle of Man is historically very poor. We don't have a very good record of keeping records and sharing that data as well. So if we could do a little bit more of that, then maybe we might find that you would have a group of staff that would quite happily take on another area and to develop that.
Okay, any more questions from the audience in there? I've got loads that have been sent in. Anybody else there? In that case, I want to go to poverty. And a message that came in just to say, we talk about the rich people on the Isle of Man, but how can there be a layer of people who are struggling to get by when they talk about no unemployment on the Isle of Man? Claire Christian.
So poverty is on the Isle of Man, and I think it was quite a big realisation in the last administration, which is shocking, but we've really got to address this, and I see this from a constituency level, that it's so important that just little things like, I'm an employer, I pay my staff the living wage. I think that's really important. That can help contribute to my staff being able to contribute back to the economy, and also obviously paying higher national insurance and taxes from a business point of view too. I think that we need to try and move towards that. The government have already agreed that in the last administration, so we've got a 5-year plan now to address in this next administration to bring everybody up to the living wage. This should hopefully bring a lot of families out of poverty. In my manifesto, I also talk about, because we've obviously got a low birth rate as well, and I talk about how we should actually fund, like many other countries do, a fund for people who have a baby in the first year of their term, and this really gives them far more support to be able, and encourages people to have children, because at the moment they're struggling with the decision of having more children or going back to work, and this just isn't acceptable.
Okay, Paul Quine.
Yeah, poverty, the fact that it's around is a shame on all of us, really. In 2021, that people are actually living in Douglas South in abject poverty, and people who I've had cause to visit over the course of the last year, with children and older people as well, who have become isolated from the community. They effectively have ceased to live any sort of active life. So we need to address the wide spectrum of poverty, how it affects people. And basically, I went to the food banks to speak with Mr. Mellon, who's doing a fantastic job there. But there are different types of poverty. There are people who use the food bank who are actually asset rich but cash poor. So we have to work with people like them to ensure that we give the best to our people to help them actually work themselves out of poverty, as Claire's just touched upon.
Sarah Maltby.
Well, the statistics tell you that any children on free school meals generally tend to underperform when it comes to education. So that we know that this is a problem, and it's been a problem right from the very beginning. So breakfast clubs, we need to introduce more options for that, making it free. I don't think we should be asking people to pay for a service that really we should be providing. I feel like we need to give our people the best opportunity to learn, and if we don't give them the best opportunity to learn, then how are we expecting people to be able to get where they need to get to?
It can often be, though, can't it? You'll have a young family, maybe a couple of children, and they simply can't afford childcare for people to go out to work. Yeah. So they're trapped.
Before and after school childcare is notoriously very difficult to find and to pay for. Yeah. When we talk about, it goes back to the question before, how can we, the before and after school childcare can range to like sort of £10 to £15, just for an hour, and you have another child, and then it kind of goes up. It's very expensive, but obviously it's very important because these are your children that you're giving over to somebody else, and I'm not expecting it to be free, but at the same time it needs to be affordable for people.
Okay, Gerard Higgins.
From a tax background, what I've seen in the past is, yes, we just keep putting up personal tax allowances. I'm not saying that we shouldn't put them up to some degree, but the trouble is, if you don't pay any tax, then you're not benefiting from that at all. So I want to see some of that money being invested in helping with childcare costs, helping with energy bills, because what I'm seeing go around the constituency is people living in abject poverty, and we really need to, by the end of the term of this administration, have wiped out poverty on the Isle of Man. We are a wealthy nation.
If people aren't getting paid enough and they're skilled enough, does that mean we have some lousy employers then who aren't paying the proper wages?
Well, we've also got to work on that as well, Andy, because we need to have need to have the minimum wage as something of the past. We need to be working to having a living wage, and we also need to be locking in to ensure that that's inflation-proof.
And just on that, the government is the worst example. I mean, we have how many zero-hour contracts? We need to lead by example.
Okay, Paul Quine.
I think the movement up to the living wage, I think we'll put about £5,180 per year into the pockets of those families. But we need to address the issue of education. We need, I was brought up in a tight sort of house where my mother had to budget. My mother I only had so much money to spend every week, by my father, and she had to budget to ensure that myself and my three siblings and her and my father were fed, and she managed it every day. So it's about actually teaching people to make the best value of the money that they have.
Okay, we've got a question. And your name, sir, is? Madam.
Hi, thank you. It's Marion Kenny. The funding of long-term nursing and residential care is a pressing issue for the Isle of Man. The UK government is putting up taxes to pay for social care. What should the Isle of Man do?
Gerard Higgins.
Well, I see what the UK government is planning on doing. They're planning on raising national insurance. In raising national insurance, you are hitting the everyday people in our community. Our supermarket workers, our nurses, our frontline staff that only last year we were praising for the work that they did in the pandemic. We shouldn't be doing that first and foremost. But what we need to do is we need to take stock of our current position. I'm going back to what I was saying earlier. We need to look at where the waste is, where savings can be achieved, and then we need to decide how we're going to actually split those out. Because we shouldn't have this knee-jerk reaction of let's go and get extra money for social care at the moment, because my worry with it is it's going to hit those people hardest, the workers in our community. It's going to squeeze the middle in our community, that squeeze middle in our community, and yet people who have got dividends, rental income, they will not be hit by national insurance. The wealthiest will not be paying their fair share in this.
Claire Christian.
So since I've been elected, I've obviously worked in 2 departments, and one of the things that I've seen is the departments get given budgets which they spend, and they have fear if they don't spend it, then they won't get it the next year. And we see this at the very top level all the way down. And this is what we've got to stop. Again, it's that joined up policy, joined up government. We've got to set budgets that will go across the way, not down the way. And it's so important because actually, if we make cost benefits, cost savings, we don't have to raise the national insurance.
Claire Christian, could you just clarify that then for the layperson? What do you mean if you don't spend the budget?
So for example, if you get a £2 million budget and you don't spend that budget, you spend 1.5 million of it, it's very unlikely that Treasury will give you that 2 million the next year.
There's a hurried approach, Andy, to pay in February or March. Use it.
The 31st of March
conundrum. So they spend
conundrum.
up to that limit.
Yeah, okay.
And that's of course, you're going to buy the extra folders, buy the extra equipment, or whether you needed to or not, and it's at that level. So I would say national insurance, we should not absolutely be raising that for that purpose to fund care. I think we can look and absolutely address this situation. That's one of the reasons why, if I'm elected, I want to go into Treasury so that I can absolutely address these issues on the forefront.
Sarah Maltby.
If you're living on the Isle of Man and you're taking advantage of our lower tax rates, then you should have a social conscience, a social responsibility to look after our social care. End of story.
Okay, Paul Quine.
I mean, Gerard touched on it, and also what Claire said, the fact by putting up taxation, you actually end up with less money in the pot, because all it does is drive wealthy people who pay tax off the island into the arms of our competitors. So it actually has a negative effect. The way we need to go about it is rightly like Claire says. I mean, if you look at department after department, that was a idiotic incident with the Slough resurfacing back about 8 years ago. I mean, departments spend the money like drunken sailors as it comes up towards the end of the year because they fully know that it will not be getting it in the following year. So we need to look at how the funding is dished out, and that way we can make the savings to put in to help address the issue.
Now, a lot of people know that, but there may be many voters, and maybe young voters, who don't know that principle of government. If by the 31st of March you haven't spent the money, you won't get it. It won't come back to you. Why is that then? Why isn't it rolled over?
It covers such a vast part of government, Andy, and it's all about procurement. You know, it's about, again, what we said before, about the silos of government, each having their own budget, each procuring their own contracts. We need to take that out. We need to cut out that waste, cut out that marzipan from the cake, and be able to actually fund something that people come to you with a proper business case for.
Okay, we got another question. Your name, sir?
Steve Doyle.
And your question?
I really want to know how we're going to fund all these changes. It's fine saying there might be some savings, but we've spoken here tonight, we need more GPs, we need more police. We're also going to have, similar to the UK, the issue that Boris is facing at the moment, where NI is going up so that people don't have to sell their homes. That's going to become an issue here in the Isle of Man. We've got the landing port in Liverpool, which is escalated beyond all comprehension.
Okay, can I just ask you one thing, sir? In principle, do you think that it's the government's job to provide social care for older people?
Yes, would be my answer to that.
Okay.
I also would like to just pick up on what Paul said about wealthy people coming to the island.
Okay.
We have good tax rates here. Why shouldn't they pay a little bit more in income tax?
Oh, well, let's go to the man who's been working in income tax, Gerard Higgins.
If we look at in terms of tax caps, now that can be seen as quite controversial, but if you look at the last time, I think the Treasury Minister said in 2017-18, in terms of tax and national insurance, that was worth £36 million in terms of the employees that were directly related to people that had come in who were tax caps and had brought their business to the island. They pay their own tax liability. What you have to be careful of here is that you don't drive them away. We have to remain competitive against the likes of Guernsey or Jersey, and I agree with what Paul's saying here. We've got to be careful. If you drive them away, we can actually be in a worse position and lose tax receipts. We don't only lose the tax receipts, we lose the jobs, we lose the spend in the economy from those people who are contributing through VAT to our VAT sharing agreement with the United Kingdom. It can have an effect right through the economy.
Paul Quine.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing of social care for older people. I personally, it's in my manifesto. I want to see more sheltered housing built, like Hazel Court, like Saddle Mews, so people can live in their older years with the dignity that they wish. Where carers can come and visit them on a day and on a daily basis, rather than sitting in a residential care home. I mean, the cost of staying in Salisbury Street residential care home for 1 year is £57,000. It would be cheaper to live on an ocean liner, and you'd get your bedding changed every day. There'd be non-stop entertainment. You'd be fed, and you've got a fully equipped hospital on board. In Salisbury Street, you don't even get a bar of soap for your money.
Who's making a profit out of that, Paul? Somebody's making a profit.
Exactly. That's what needs to be audited.
Okay, Sarah Maltby.
I think it's a fallacy. I don't think people would leave. I think that people that come to the Isle of Man will stay on the Isle of Man. Their children are in our schools. I think more. This theory has never been tested. Have we ever tested it? Have we ever?
We haven't seen tax caps
go down. And they go. How do we get them back?
Yes.
Well, listen.
That's it. They've gone. The hair's right.
But in the UK, the Isle of Man would still be a desirable place to be for those people, because the tax would never get to the levels that it is in the UK. I understand your point about Guernsey and Jersey. However, I think that we still have a very favourable system over here, that people would still come to the island.
We have put the tax cap up from £100,000 to £200,000. Okay. Where's that tipping point?
Okay, I just want to ask you one thing, Sarah Maltby. I mean, do you think we have a demographic time bomb coming our way? The Isle of Man, as Claire Christians mentioned, the birth rate's falling. We have people getting older all the time. There is a time bomb coming. We do need to fund social care. Where would that come from?
Older people, I don't think should be classed as a time bomb.
Do you think we should sequester people's private assets then? Do you think people should have to sell their houses to go?
I've spoken to a lot of people who fear that that's what's going to happen. They're going to be buried a pauper because they're going to have everything taken away from them. And that's a real fear that people have. People shouldn't be living with that fear.
Claire Christian.
So back to your question about where the funding will come from. I actually go back to my last question. Obviously, I'm talking about streamlining the government, with joined up government and looking at budgets. But also there's definitely, investments. That's really, really key right now. Long-term investments, so that it can generate revenue. One thing I would say about nursing care fees and things like that, is there also does need to be some regulation on it, because at the moment I've met many constituents that even just in this last August the home care fees have been put up by £6,000 a year with very, very little notice, and they're paying for this privately themselves, and this is an absolute strain on them, and the government need to put in regulation with this, and they got 1 month's notice for this, and this is really appalling that people got treated in this way.
Okay, and another question. Sorry, sir.
I agree with your comments on the tax cap, but I dispute that the tax cap has been attractive to what the island probably thought they would get out of the tax cap. I don't think we've had an answer yet to say, in reality, how all these changes will be funded. We need more. You mentioned young people looking for employment. The fact is, I don't think we have enough choice for young people in terms of industry, commerce, whatever. So I think
you're talking about diversifying the economy.
Correctly. So I think we need something drastic in terms
well,
of
it's
diversity.
No coincidence that last week Strick's new factory opened in China. So how do we get different and diverse industry to the Isle of Man, Paul Quine?
It's a question. I mean, we our brightest and our best are leaving us, and they're not coming back. We have to get our brightest and best back here to the island, where they can support us and they can drive our own economy forward. So the way I would look at it, we need more doctors, we need more nurses, we need key workers back here. So from my profession, from aviation, I would take an abundance system. So if I was to join, say, EasyJet tomorrow, it costs about £25,000 to put a pilot through a conversion course, including the simulator work, etc. Now, what you do is you sign a bond after that to ensure that you can't just clear off and work for another airline the following day. So you bond for 5 years. So that's what we should be doing with our younger people. We should be looking for people who wish to be doctors, wish to be dentists, teachers, etc. And we should pay their university fees on the understanding that we bond them for 5 years, that when they finish university, they come back here and they begin work here, instead of drifting off. And I had an appalling incident, which was I spoke to a young gentleman this week. We talk about mental health. Now, I was a young gentleman who he's got a degree in psychology through the Open University, which he was awarded a 2-2. He's worked for Autism Initiatives. He works currently in mental health, although he's now handing in his notice because he's going on to do his Masters. He's fluent in sign language. His partner is a psychologist as well. She specialises in child psychology. They are both Manx born and bred. He has asked for funding to help with his Masters, and he's been refused because he didn't have a 2-1. So this is a classic case of bureaucratic stupidity driving away the very people we need. They are Manx born and bred, and they are so upset by this, they have no inclination to come back here to the island.
Okay, Sarah Maltby, how do we diversify the economy?
Just on what Paul just said before that, I don't agree that we should be bonding people to come back to the Isle of Man immediately. I think that we should allow our young people to go off and see the world, find out what's going on and bring those skills back to the island. Make them back, but if you haven't got the house to give them, then how on earth can we promise them a life that they deserve?
Gerard Higgins.
We've got to make the Isle of Man an attractive place for them to come back to, as and when they do come back, in terms of affordable housing, education, a decent health service, family friendly.
Okay, Claire Christian.
So I agree with Sarah, actually. Yeah. I think it is really important, and I'm proof of the pudding. I went away for 20 years, and I worked in the fashion industry. I lived in Italy. I lived in New York for some of that time as well. And I came back to the island, and I'm investing back in that. And yes, you might have wanted me 10 or 15 years younger, but I came back when I did.
Why did you come back?
Family. I came back to be with family for that reason. I wanted to be closer to family.
I think a lot of people do that, Andy.
Yeah. And I think the Isle of Man has a natural draw. You get to a certain point where you actually, you've had enough of Mayfair and you want to come back to here. But I would say about diversification. So what we want to do is, and I spoke about it before, industries, if you pick the film industry, for example, we absolutely, that was such a massive mistake that the government made. You could have had script writers, you could have had continuity, you could have had film producers, you could have, the jobs that could have provided were huge. Catering, everything, cleaning, it could have reached very, very many sectors, and that could have been a really good industry for us.
Okay, we're in Douglas South, so I want just a very quick word from all of you about Dingy Douglas and how we can make Douglas more attractive. Sarah Maltby.
Dingy Douglas Wow.
Brownfield
yeah,
sites, broken pavements.
Brownfield
roads.
sites needs urgent development. We shouldn't be giving away our greenfields to any more developers. We need to invest in those areas and make those areas work for us.
Paul Quine.
Yeah, I mean, you remember the concept of Douglas 2000? What happened there? I mean, that's 21 years ago, and we're still talking about it now. So yeah, we you know, national government needs to work with the corporation, and we need to identify, you know, what's wrong and how we put it right.
Claire Christian.
Well, I actually, in Douglas South, I'm actually really proud of how people look after their properties and look after their places around them. And I have to say, I think it's fantastic, and I've really seen that over this
But look
time.
at Victoria Street, it's crumbling. The road is crumbling.
So Victoria Street's obviously where my store is,
That's
and
why I said it.
I can tell you, and I take pride in my store. I will get out and I will go and jet wash those pavements myself, and
You
that's what
can't
I will
mend the
do.
road.
I can't mend the road, no, but...
Okay, Gerard Higgins.
It's back to what we were talking about at the outset. It's back to basics. It's making sure that our roads, our infrastructure are supported, and also with what Sarah said with regard to brownfield sites, we need to be developing on brownfield sites. Forget greenfield sites.
Each candidate will now have a minute to sum up. Claire Christian.
Remember, when you come to vote on the 23rd of September, I am the candidate who has continued to be the conduit between businesses, self-employed people and the government. Treasury, I also challenge Treasury to implement the isolation capacity benefit, which helps support you those 14 days where you had to isolate. I will always put Douglas South constituents first, and I will look for the problems that will affect you. I will focus on the services that government provide and strive to get that right for our current population so growth can happen later. Our existing and growing economy, affordable housing, a robust mental health system all affect the constituents of Douglas South. I am the candidate who is strong, decisive and not afraid to challenge government to do better, because we must do better.
Gerard Higgins.
Thank you, Andy. On the 23rd of September, you have a chance to turn the tide. You can either continue with the inefficiencies, the endless layers of management and the spending spree on wages and projects, or you can make sure that the money that you contribute to pay MHK salaries and to spend on your behalf is used for what matters to you. It is time to park the gravy train once and for all. We need better frontline services and financial support in healthcare and education, better roads and pavements and a better tomorrow for future generations. I believe I have the skills, experience, energy, dedication, compassion and above all the ability to listen and support you, the people of Douglas South, for the next 5 years. If you want actions rather than words, solutions rather than problems, I would ask you to please vote Gerard Higgins on the 23rd of September.
Sarah Maltby.
Sticking up for people and putting people first is what I do best. I've been an employer representative for a number of years and I have a track record of continuously fighting for workers' rights. I'm sadly one of the minority Manx people that after attending university returned back to the island. As a home bird, there was no question I would choose to settle here. I'm incredibly proud to be Manx, but it's not working for everyone. I've been on the periphery of Manx politics a long time, but it's time now to help form policy and play my part in supporting the community and island that helped raise me. We've heard a lot tonight about international and national agendas. I want to look after the people. Domestic issues is where my strengths play out, and I really hope that you can support me on 23rd of September. Thank you.
Paul Quine.
Ladies and gentlemen, as a proud Manxman, it's been an immense privilege to have represented you, the people of Douglas South, since I was elected at the by-election last year. In that time, I'd like to think I have striven to work as hard as I can for the constituency, rolling up my sleeves and getting stuck in, addressing many issues, as well as not being afraid to take the government to task and scrutinise it on issues such as the steam packers employment practices, MUA tariff reduction for private generation of electricity and wasted money at Ronaldsway Airport. And so I seek your confidence again. The time that lies ahead for our island will require representatives with experience and who are not afraid to speak up for what is right, such as a strong economy, affordable housing and investing in our youth. I am just such a person. I have gained that experience during my time as your representative and have never been afraid to take my feet and speak up for you and your family. So please, on the 23rd of September, think positive, act positive and vote Quine.
Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow night Manx Radio is going to be live in Laxey at the Shore for the constituency of Garth, and on Friday we'll be at Peel Golf Club for Glen Faber and Peel. And I would urge you, you've seen the candidates tonight, not just for Douglas South, but when they come knocking on your door, remember these people have given part of their lives over the past few months. They're putting their heart and soul into this, and they obviously want you to connect. So I urge you to speak to them, to think deeply about what you're going to do 2 weeks tomorrow when we get to that general election. And of course, you can go to manxradio.com. Everything's there, including the translations in Manx, Russian, German, Portuguese, Ukrainian, Chinese, Afrikaans, Greek, Hungarian, and Polish. We got an election timeline, information for voters. Everybody who's standing on there as well, and the ones who've agreed to do videos and do podcasts are there as well. There's lots and lots of background. We've even got videos in Strand Street with drunken...
in Dungisca.
And they look very nice. Elliot Turner was there, took his life in his hand. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Claire Christian and Gerard Higgins and Sarah Maltby and Paul Quine tonight. Thanks to Paul Henry and everybody at the Pulrose Community Pub.